More than 500,000 people slaughtered? Religious persecution? Entire regions in ruins? Hadrian was an enlightened emperor. He loved music and philosophy, built beautiful cities, and was known as a peace-loving ruler. So what infuriated him so much that almost 2,000 years ago, he marched half the Roman army into the small province of Judea, under his most esteemed officers, with one mission: search, destroy, and burn. Perhaps Bar Kokhba? "60 years had passed since the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and the Temple. Grieving and in pain, the Jews anxiously awaited the opportunity to rebuild the city. Then, in 130 CE, the Roman Emperor Hadrian visited Jerusalem to rebuild the city from its ruins. The Jews were thrilled, until they realized that Hadrian had not come to rebuild Jerusalem. He had come to bury it, and to build on its ruins a pagan Roman city. On the 9th of Av, the Roman governor held the plowing ceremony that marked the establishment of a new Roman colony. Hadrian's decision to build a temple to Jupiter, precisely where the temple stood, caused tremendous turmoil among the Jews. The humiliation was unbearable. Tens of thousands took up arms to defend Jerusalem with their lives. Their charismatic leader would be remembered as one of the fiercest characters in Jewish history: Shimon Bar Kokhba. To the people of Judea, Bar Kokhba was a superhero. They said he would catch catapult stones in mid-flight and kick them back at the Romans' heads. His soldiers could supposedly uproot a tree while riding a galloping horse. But although he became a legend, the details of his life remained obscure. Even his real name was unknown. Until 1952, when the archaeologist Aelia found caves in the Judean desert to which the last of the rebels had fled. Numerous objects were discovered in the caves, among them a bundle of letters from 1,800 years ago. I sat trembling at my desk in Jerusalem as I gazed at the bundle of ancient papyri in my hand. Carefully, I extracted 2 of them from the bundle. I could not believe my eyes. Shimon bar Kokhba, Nasi, ruler over Israel.
מתוך האגרות האלה אנחנו גילינו קצת על הדמות של בר כוכבא. מצד אחד אנחנו רואים שהוא היה מפקד קשוח, והוא לא היסס לאיים, לשרוף לאנשים בתים או לאסור אותם.
מצד שני, אנחנו רואים שהוא גם מאוד דאג את החיילים שלו, גם לאספקה של 4 המינים לחג הסוכות.
הוא שולח מכתב לעין גדי שיתנו להם לולבים ואתרוגים, הדסים וערבות.
Civilians were also required to provide food and supplies. Bar Kokhba had no patience for people who refused to do their part. You are living well, eating and drinking off the property of the house of Israel, and care nothing about your brethren. A rough, tough hero, sometimes even violent. But Bar Kokhba was perceived by many as the only man who could save the Jewish people in these dire times. Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest sages of the generation, even proclaimed him the Messiah. Not everyone agreed that Bar Kokhba was the savior the Jews had been waiting for. But the nation joined in the uprising with enthusiasm. Symbols of the revolt were imprinted on thousands of coins. The fight for the redemption of Jerusalem under Shimon Bar Kokhba was underway. Under the Romans' noses, the Jews started making weapons. According to the Roman historian Cassius Dio, the Jews dug escape tunnels and attack tunnels underground, like this one. The fighters emerged from these tunnels, attacked the Roman troops by surprise, and then retreated back into the depths of the earth. The Roman troops were helpless in the face of this new tactic. Even if a Roman soldier could locate the opening to a secret tunnel, he would have to remove his armor, leave his shield, bow, and spear outside, and crawl in with just his sword. Inside the tunnel, Bar Kokhba's troops would be waiting silently with drawn daggers or a heavy rock ready to smash in his head. Hundreds of such tunnels were dug all over the country. The tactic took the Roman army by surprise and managed to undermine its control of the region. Word of the success spread, fomenting unrest throughout the empire. The Jews everywhere gathered and began to rise up against the Romans. Many outside nations, too, were joining them, and the whole earth, one might almost say, was in commotion over the matter. Somewhat belatedly, Hadrian realized that Bar Kokhba was more of a threat than he had thought, and that if he didn't put down the uprising quickly, things would get out of control. The solution was to bring Julius Severus, the most celebrated officer in the Roman army, from Britain, and put a huge army at his disposal. Tens of thousands of troops were brought from Egypt, Syria, Transjordan, Bulgaria, Hungary, and Italy itself. But the Jews didn't give up. Men, women, and children from the surrounding villages grabbed makeshift weapons, whatever they could find, and bravely attacked the Roman soldiers. The result was devastating. Tens of thousands were killed. So many Romans were killed in battle that entire units were wiped out. The severity of the situation was expressed by Hadrian in a letter to the Senate in Rome. When reporting on the fighting in Judea, he was forced to omit the standard opening phrase, "If you and your children are in good health, it is well. I and the legions are in good health." Hadrian and his troops were not in good health. Despite the heavy losses, the Roman war machine was unrelenting. Soldiers surrounded the tunnels, set fires at their entrances, and then killed every last fighter one by one. The few surviving fighters fled to caves in the Judean desert, bringing with them their most precious possessions: personal documents, valuable bronze items, talit and tefillin, and keys to the homes they had left behind. But even here, the long arm of the Romans caught up with them. The uprising was crushed. Close to 1,000 villages were burned down, and on the 9th of Av in the year 135 CE, Beitar, the last stronghold, fell, along with the hero on whom the people had hung so many hopes, Bar Kokhba. The bloodbath perpetrated by Hadrian was unprecedented in the Roman Empire. They killed men, women, and children until their blood poured out through the doorways and the passages, and the horses were submerged in blood up to their noses. More than 500,000 Jews were slaughtered. The survivors were sold into slavery, often for blood sport entertainment or prostitution. There were so many of them that the price of a Jewish slave dropped to that of a portion of horse feed. Hadrian celebrated his victory and commemorated it with a huge monument whose ruins were found at Tel Shalem in the Beit Sha'an Valley. Near these ruins, a bronze statue of the emperor was discovered. It is now on display in the Israel Museum. On the emperor's armor, we see Roman soldiers brutally trampling their enemies. But for Hadrian, that was not enough. Humiliated by the casualties among his troops and convinced that the Jewish faith was the driving force behind the uprising, he declared a war of annihilation against Judaism itself. Circumcision, Sabbath observance, Torah study, shofar blowing, and the eating of matzah on Passover, all the commandments that made the Jewish people unique and gave meaning and identity to their lives, were banned, and anyone who observed them was cruelly executed. Many Jews refused to obey the decrees and preferred to die rather than give up their faith. Among them was Rabbi Akiva. The consequences of the uprising were catastrophic for the Jewish people. Judea was completely destroyed and half its population was killed. Many survivors fled to the Galil to seek refuge among their Jewish brethren there. Jerusalem, the reason for the uprising, was wiped out completely, and a pagan Roman city, Aelia Capitolina, was built on its ruins. On Hadrian's orders, the Jews were barred from living within sight of the city for which they had given their lives. It was a crushing, unequivocal victory. And it appeared as though Jerusalem would be forgotten, like other capitals conquered by the Roman Empire. But history tells us a different story. The Jews' devotion to Jerusalem never waned. Many years after the glorious Roman Empire ceased to exist and the statues of its emperors had been moved to museums, Jerusalem once again became the center of the Jewish world and the capital of Israel. More Jews live there today than ever before in history. So, Hadrian, you managed to uproot the Jews from Jerusalem. But uprooting Jerusalem from the hearts of the Jews, that is apparently a different story.